Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to use the promo code FSD20 for a 20% discount on the products over at fantasyguru.com.
Absolutely nothing tells you that it's fantasy baseball draft season like doing a recap of a fantasy baseball draft. Yes, we will have our first recap of 2024, and we're lucky enough to have one of the participants. Ray Flowers is back with us here at Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com. Kyle Elfrink on this end. Ray was up late last night drafting in the League of Alternative Baseball Reality, a mixed league draft, and he is very happy to report to us this morning that he was pleased with the time. Ray, usually I get you after these drafts and you moan and groan about how long it took, but not today with the LABR mixed draft.
No, I had the 10th pick out of the 15 teams, so it was a 15-team mixed league, and we cranked it out. Everyone hold your breath, because it's a long draft for some people if they're used to football, in under 4 hours, which is pretty good for a 15-team league with 29 rounds. I was so pleased to see once the clock started for that first pick that it was set at 60 seconds and not 90 seconds. The crew did a good job last night.
Well, I will compare it, Ray, to the draft I am currently in, which is with Tout Wars. And I knew this going in, but for those who have followed Ray Flowers for many, many years, nothing chaps his ass more than making a slow draft. So, Ray, I'm in a 50-round slow draft, which these usually lead up to like late March. I mean, these drafts take a full month. They allow 8 hours between picks, Ray.
Okay.
We started yesterday at 1 Eastern.
Okay.
It is now 11 Eastern. 35 picks down.
That's generally how they start, right? They start really well, and then, but that's a 3 rounds.
I thought that would be slow for the early round. Right?
That's a really good start. Yeah, I hope it keeps up.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing they do is they do take a break overnight. That's another moment that perturbs Ray, is not having that break. But I think the break is from like 9 p.m. Eastern until maybe it's 11 p.m. Eastern, but it's up until 9 a.m. So pretty well overnight. We don't have to worry about things. We started up a couple of hours ago. We've yet to get a pick in. So we're still waiting for somebody to make that pick. I may have a chance of making a pick live on air. When that draft gets done, which is probably 5 weeks from now, maybe we'll recap it. But we will recap Ray's draft from last night, which was 15 teams, as he noted, 29 rounds. We'll take a look at the squad he put together, maybe some of the other developments in that LABR draft. And it is expert draft season. You're going to be hearing a lot about LABR, a lot about Tout Wars, our friends over at SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. They cover almost all of these. I know Ray and I are getting set for a big weekend with LABR next week. I think it is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll be doing all sorts of auctions, both mixed as well as mono leagues. So we'll talk more about that. But today we'll focus on the straight-up draft that Ray went through last night in LABR. Additionally, we hit you with the regulars, if you will, on FSD. We're going to talk BABIP from the Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide that they have over at fantasyguru.com. Ray always has some things to follow with BABIP. Cleveland Guardians will be the team that we preview. We'll continue our look at shortstops today. Talk about a few of the bums from last season. Some big names, by the way, on that list of guys who struggled a bit in 2023. Also, we have news of new homes for Liam Hendricks and Amed Rosario. Not huge names, and certainly in the case of Hendricks, probably not even draftable names because he's going to miss a majority of the season. But Amed Rosario might have landed in a pretty decent spot. And additionally, we will have news on Aaron Judge. Ray, the toe is still a thing. And I was just looking at that LABR draft last night, Ray. 13th out of 15 teams. That is, he's still a first-round guy there. But for a 12-team league, Ray, that's falling out of the first round, which is not really a spot Aaron Judge has been. Maybe this news truly is affecting his status for 2024 in the eyes of many.
Yeah, they talked about this on the broadcast last night. People can still find it on demand at SiriusXM. And they were kind of saying that, you still take the shot. And I'm like, what do we have? let me pull it up real quick. We have Aaron Judge in the outfield, not overall, just in the outfield in 8th. So he's not a first round pick for me. And I get why he is. He's a dynamic player, but you got to look at this, Kyle. He's played 115 games twice in 6 years. He's a huge guy. He's got the toe issue now that they're already talking about. I think you have to be concerned about how many games he's going to play at this point.
We will dig in a bit more into Aaron Judge, LABR draft as well. But before any of that, let's dig into the specials. We always like to remind you. I was going to say it's never too late, but it may be too late at some point. Ray's reminded us this early bird special is not going to last forever. But Ray, it's still available as of today, correct?
Yeah, the early bird special. Let's before I
check at this exact moment.
The early bird special for baseball. Let's click in here. It's $50. Use the promo code FSD20, FSD20. That drops it down 20%. As of right now, it still is, Kyle. So it's $50 for the early bird. Of course, you can pay that if you'd like. If you'd like to, you can use the promo code FSD20, though, knock another $10 off. It's full season content all the way to the World Series. So it's not just the preseason. Articles, Discord, rankings updated every month, all that kind of stuff. We've also got the all-in NFL package. If you're interested in off-season NFL, we'll cover the faux NFL leagues. What are they even called at this point? Is it the UFL? What is it? What are they calling it, Kyle?
They merged.
Yeah.
So I don't know which name took over. I want to say it's maybe XFL kind of took over as the name of the new league.
I forget what it is. It's too early in the morning. It's 8 o'clock here. We'll cover that. We'll cover all the running up to the draft. We'll cover the reviews of last season. So all that's included in the all-in package for football. It's $19.99 right now. And then the big package is the NBA all-in package, which includes NBA, NHL, college basketball, PGA, MMA, soccer, and racing. And all of that is only $75. So we got a lot of ways to get involved. And as always, use that promo code FSD20 to help you get a discount.
Okay, so there you go. You're set and ready to rock and roll. And hey, I know a lot of people are now starting to think more and more about baseball. Get a hold of that draft guide. It's absolutely huge. It's updated each and every day, new articles. We've been talking about the articles. And certainly, I just want to remind everybody, because sometimes they look and they think, draft guide, $40. Oh, my God. This is not only the preseason stuff. This is all year long. April, May, June, July, August, September. A lot of people can quit come July. They get ready for football. Ray and his crew on the baseball side, they don't. They keep rolling with baseball. Columns will still be going up. You'll have access to all that. Ray will still be answering your questions. If you are serious about fantasy baseball, or if you want to become serious about fantasy baseball, none better than getting that draft guide and getting the season-long coverage that Ray provides. Okay, let's jump into this LABR mixed draft. And for those who don't know, this has been a long-running league. The League of Alternative Baseball Reality, started by USA Today and the old Baseball Weekly. I guess it's been close to 30 years. I think maybe this is year 30, year 31, something like that. And they've expanded. I mean, Ray, at the start, this was not a league that was there in 1994 or whatever it was. They were going straight auctions, NL and AL. They were doing it over the phone. I think we've heard all the stories. Steve Gardner now is kind of the head honcho of everything that's going on with these leagues. And Ray, you've been a part of these leagues for a number of years. This has always been an online draft. Coming up here, I guess this upcoming week or so, we'll start having some in-person drafts down in Florida that a lot of experts will be participating in. But Ray, as you look at last night's get-together, mixed leagues, 15 teams, 29 rounds. It's a deep call. It's a deep run. The first round, just to give people a rundown, Acuna went 1. We're seeing that almost everywhere. No surprise. 2, 3, and 4 can be different. Julio Rodriguez went number 2 here. Bobby Witt Jr. went 3. Corbin Carroll 4. Probably the first surprise, Ray, was there at number 5. Derek Van Riper of The Athletic not only goes pitcher, but goes early at pitcher, number 5. Goes Spencer Strider. And then, in fact, in the second round, he goes with another pitcher, Corbin Burns. He was the only expert in this league out of 15 of them that started pitcher in this LABR mixed draft.
Yeah, and we know DVR, great guy, great analyst, and we know he's an aggressive drafter. He's always
high. Yeah, always aimed high.
Yeah. So if a user did this, I'd be like, whoa, this is not. But DVR's got a plan, so not the plan I would enact. I don't think it's a plan, again, that 98% of people listening or watching should enact. I think it really puts you in a tough spot, because if either Strider or Burns struggles or gets hurt, you have that hole to fill, which you're not going to fill. And then secondly, you're passing on these guys that are 20-20 players, 30-30 players, the dynamic offensive players you just don't get. And so it's a very risky, very aggressive strategy. It's different in an auction because if you do this in an auction, you can still pick and choose which players you want to fill out your roster. In a snake draft, you're basically left with whoever is left that no one else took. Mm-hmm. So it's very risky. It's very dangerous. And it's interesting to me. I wouldn't recommend it at all. But it's interesting to see how he backfilled behind that because he also did things like take a chance on Royce Lewis, who we talked about last week.
It's risk everywhere with his team. I mean, buying Vlad, hopefully on an MVP seat, if Vlad can get back to that, he gets him in the third round. You mentioned Lewis. Cody Bellinger doesn't have a team. So there's that uncertainty. Jackson Trio. I mean, he took him early. He's drafting Jackson Trio in the 9th round to be, in effect, like a 30-20 dude, if not better. I mean, that's drafting him to be the rookie of the year. And then, I will say on the back end with the pitching, Ray, he did go with veterans that he hopes, he can get 150 innings out of at least. Guys like Darvish, Savale, Talion, Severino. He went late with Jake DeGrom, but he got him in the 25th round. So it's a typical high risk, high reward thing from DVR. In
this league, we do have unlimited IL spots.
Okay.
So that does help, but it also hinders you because when you go to the waiver wire, if everyone's got 7 guys on the injured list, there's no one to pick up. Again, not the way I would put a team. I took a lot of risk with my team in a different way. I wouldn't recommend what DVR did, but again, a lot of people, and it was said over and over again. And I think this is how a lot of the quote unquote experts play it. They don't necessarily play it. Here's exactly how my rankings go. They play it. I want to finish in first and I don't care if I finish in 14th. Yeah. And I think that's one of these teams.
And the logic of that, Ray, is you and almost all these people in here. I mean, these are very industry heavy names. Absolutely. I mean, everybody's in 15-20 leagues. You get to a point at the end of the season where you have to really hone in on the 2 or 3 that you're going for a title with. Which again, for most general people out there, maybe you're in 2 leagues, 1 league. It's a little different for the experts. So they kind of do have this high risk, high reward. They get to mid-July and they decide where they're going to focus. That's just the reality of the situation. So Strider goes 5th. Only pitcher in the first round in this LABR. Betts, Tucker, Tatis, 3 straight outfielders. Freeman, Raven jumps in at number 10 and gets Juan Soto, followed by Trey Turner, Jose Ramirez, Aaron Judge. We're going to talk about both those guys later in the show. Shohei Ohtani and Yordan Alvarez, a couple of UT-only hitters, go 14 and 15. Ohtani, now with the Dodgers, hitting only, and Yordan Alvarez. Ray mentioned Juan Soto. Was there much debate in your mind? We should note this is not OBP. This is batting average. Yep. But was there any doubt with Juan Soto at number 10 for you in that first round?
Yeah, just so everyone knows, after this, I do it every year during this draft. I do a diary during the draft. So as I'm drafting the team, I'm writing this. The article will be up about an hour after the show today. So I'll link it here and everything, and people can read it for free, my review of the whole draft. There was a lot of debate. The only comment I ever write before the actual draft itself is the first round comments. It's like, this is what I'm leaning. Here we go. And it's really fascinating because I had Soto, Turner, and Ohtani as that group. Ultimately, I went with Soto, and you can see my team there on the screen as well. I went with Soto over Ohtani, which is a difficult decision because I think if everything plays out, everyone's healthy, I think Ohtani generates more fantasy value. I just looked at it as it's very difficult to take a first-round player in a 15-team league that's going to be UT only. Mm-hmm. It really limits your flexibility. Now, again, if Ohtani's fully healthy, he could still win the MVP as a hitter, right? So that was a very difficult decision. You get the speed piece with him. You get even more speed with Trey Turner. So, again, he was a guy I love. I've talked about him a lot. So there was debate, but I figured, floor-wise, Juan Soto with the Yankees, Aaron Judge, all of that, I thought the floor was pretty damn high.
You mentioned the team that you've put together there, and people can take a look at it for those following along. And just to give a rundown of where some of these big names landed, Soto in the first, Ray went Lindor in the second, took a shot on Seager in the third, and a shot on Yamamoto in the fourth, and a shot, Ray, on Mike Trout in the fifth. So, hey, one of those guys I could see Ray Flowers taking a shot on in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Little surprised to see you, Mr. Oracle, go with those 3. And Seager, I don't know if it's really a risk. Everything we've heard is that, yes, he's injured now, but this is, we'll let it rest, we'll let it heal. Maybe he misses a few days, a week to start the season, but after that, he should be fine. So maybe throwing him in with Yamamoto and Trout isn't fair, but he is injured now.
Mhm.
We know that. Yamamoto, never seen him pitch.
Right.
And we talked a lot about Mike Trout yesterday, Ray, and you were rather down on Trout, but you said, oh, there might be a place or two. I take him in the 5th round. I guess last night at LABR was one of those 2 or 3 spots.
Yeah, and I wrote that as I was, again, drafting him last night. I'm like, boy, I said this morning, and here's why. In the way the draft played out, I've got 1 outfielder through 4 rounds. That's okay, but there's a lot of dynamic players in the outfield, right? And the outfield starts to get pretty thin quickly from that dynamic group if you wait too long. I don't know if Trout's in that dynamic group or not yet anymore, because we talked about this. He really doesn't run. I think the combination, and I said this on the broadcast last night, the combination of Corey Seager and Mike Trout is not ideal. Okay, it's not. Because I think, what are we looking at, 135 games for both guys if everything goes right? Like that's not ideal. But the way I looked at this is I was going to do 2 things. One, I was going to pound the counting categories on offense, which I think I did. Secondly, I was going to go young pitching. And so this is not a traditional build for me. Most of the leagues I will not build this way, but this is a way a lot of people build. I get questions all the time for teams that are built this way. So I thought, all right, let me try to replicate what everyone always asks. We can follow the team throughout the year and see how it does. But it was a little bit of a rough combination, though. I had a plan, but it is, again, ideally, you wouldn't do it. 15-team league, all these experts, no one's going to slide. So you got to take some shots here in this league. It's a lot different than a home league.
Let's talk about that pitching, because the first 9 pitchers that you took, let's say roughly speaking, your starting pitchers, they all are starting pitchers except for Craig Kimbrell. Now, it's worth noting, Ray, late you went Jason Adam, Will Smith, Yennier Cano, 3 guys within 4 picks, I think, of each other. So you built a bullpen, but it was much more backloaded. Kind of talk about that strategy. Even if you go 1 reliever, Ray, I bet people would have hoped or would think that you would have gone Clase or you would have gone Hader, to get that 1 reliever. And then it's fine in rounds 22 through 28, pound it with bullpen arms, big arms, 8th inning arms, guys who can maybe get a handful of saves. But you got Craig Kimbrell as that lone gun. So talk about that decision, and then also the decision of going so heavy with the starters versus getting any bullpen like in the first 20 picks.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, and I write about this every year, there's a huge article, should we remove saves from fantasy baseball? I talk about moving to solds, and I go through the history of this. The relief position has 0, not 5%, not 7%, 0 consistency from year to year. There is no consistency. The only reliever in baseball who has saved 30 games the last 3 years is Josh Hader. 1 guy. So this idea that everyone has, like, you get that star in the bullpen and he's going to give you those 35 saves. There's 1 guy that's done it. 30 saves the last 2 years. Clase, Romano, Hader, Presley. 4 guys in all of baseball have 30 saves the last 2 years. So to me, there's just too much volatility at the spot. Too much volatility. And you look at this draft, by the end of the 4th round, there were like 7 closers taken, which is crazy. And every time I kept thinking to myself, all right, I'll get a closer here. 2 more would get drafted. And I'm like, well, I'll go next round. 2 more get drafted. I'll go next round. And it just got to the point where, the price I would have to have paid there isn't worth it. I mean, it's just not worth it. So I ended up getting Kimbrell, who I think can save 25 or 30 games for the Orioles. I got Yennier Cano in the reserve round. So I feel pretty good that I've got the Orioles closer, which I think is attractive. I considered doing the same thing with Will Smith and James McArthur in the Royals. Obviously went with the Orioles, thinking that's a better situation. I like the skills of the pitchers better. So that I just ended up in a scenario where, Kyle, the bullpen, it was just too expensive. So I ended up going heavy with the pitching.
Well, and you mentioned the bullpen going early. I mean, Paul Sporer, who was drafted at the turn, Ray, this is a very interesting draft because not only did you Yordan Alvarez as a UT first-round pick, which is fine. I mean, Alvarez can hit the hell of the baseball. He's a fine player, but you kind of talked about the lack of options if you go UT in the first round. But then he followed that up with 3 straight pitchers, 2 of them closers. So he goes Garrett Cole in the 2nd round, Hader in the 3rd round, Clase in the 4th round. Again, this is like DVR to the extreme, those picks. And we were talking before the show about that. And that is very unique. I mean, I look at, who is it? Jenny Butler of FTN Fantasy. This is very interesting. Ohtani and Harper, which I guess as of now are UT only.
Harper's first base. Harper's first.
Oh, does Harper have first base?
Incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he would. So you start Ohtani, Harper, but then 4 straight pitchers for her. Edwin Diaz, Johan Duran. That's a couple of closers. I mean, Bobby Miller's your first SP. Yikes. Holy moly, that's a lot of hype for Bobby Miller. But you see both those 2 owners at the back of the draft, picks 14 and 15, very unique builds, and that can throw off the whole draft as you get into those, rounds 3 through 8. Everything is altered because of what those 2 owners did very early in their draft.
Yeah, and again, DVR and Paul could finish 1 and 2. Like these are strategies that absolutely can work. I just think you make it more difficult on yourself doing that. If you do anything too much, there's a concern, right? You want to be more broad. You want to have not a penny stock approach where we're going to put all our money in that and hope to hit it rich. We're going to have a broad perspective here. We're going to take a look at everything. We're going to have some bonds. We're going to have a portfolio that's very
diversification.
Correct. The word was just coming out. I couldn't think of it. Diversified. That's what I think is the best way to do this. So you get a little bit of power, you get a little bit of speed, a little bit of outfield, a little bit of infield, a little bit of pitching. And that just, I think it's a good way to build. And it also allows you that freedom, which I talked about with the non-Ohtani in the first round decision. If you lock yourself in at UT in round 1, it's fine because Ohtani could be the MVP, but you're locked in. It limits your flexibility a little bit. And when you're Paul and you take 2 closers in the first 4 picks, those guys could give you 78 saves, right? You could be first in the whole league with those 2 guys. But at what point do you take another closer? Or are you locked out of closers? Maybe you're sitting there in the 10th round, you love this guy, but it just doesn't make sense because you've already got these 2. So if you aggressively target one direction at the negative of all the other directions, you pigeonhole yourself a little bit and you make it difficult because if either Hader or Clase gets hurt, he's got a problem here because you look at his team, like I'm looking at his squad, he doesn't have another reliever. He does not have another reliever on his roster. So if one of those 2 guys goes down, he doesn't even have a pivot he can turn to. He'd have to go to the waiver wire.
Yeah, and the waiver wire, as you noted, pretty thin with unlimited IL spots, which, just a quick aside, I hate that. Hate unlimited IL spots. So if you're building a league, you got to limit it or your waiver wire is going to be nothing because people will just pile up injured player after injured player after injured player. They've got a 40-man roster and 10 of it will be guys on the IL. It's just silly. We sometimes can fall into the trap, Ray, when we're looking at a draft and looking at a team, and I'm sitting here with a guy who drafted a team. We can fall into this trap, Ray, of the mutual back scratch society where, oh, Ray, this is great. Ray, this was great. Ray, this. I will say, Ray, if I have a criticism here, I don't like this infield.
Okay.
I don't like it. I mean, it's Seager and Lindor, fine. But, man, Yandy Diaz, Brendan Rodgers, Max Muncy, Luis Rengifo, it's just, you may win it, but those are guys that I'm not excited about. You cannot quit Brendan Rodgers, Ray. We need to get you off this train once and for all.
Fantasy Pro said I had the 3rd best draft.
Okay.
But no, you're right. It's one of those things. It's difficult for people to understand sometimes. They look at these drafts. A lot of people are in 10-team leagues or they're in 12-team leagues of 26 rounds. It's 15 teams, 29 rounds. It's tough. And no one in this room is letting someone fall 58 spots past their ADP. So you're not like finding a bargain late, like and have Ray ask you a question like, how the hell did you put this team together? Well, that doesn't happen here. So I think it's usually a scenario where you walk away and you're weak somewhere. It's just, I think if you look at every team, they're weak somewhere. To your point, is the infield banging? Well, the middle, it's fantastic. The rest of it, and it wasn't ideal. I did give myself a couple outs. Kevin Biggio qualifies at 3 positions. Luis Rengifo qualifies at 4 positions. The idea of Brendan Rodgers, I'm looking at second base and, I needed a corner. I needed a middle or corner infield. There was no one there. There's just, and the 4 guys I identified would just boom, boom. So it was one of those things where, I'm sitting there going, and I even wrote it in the review that'll be out later. I can't quit Brendan Rodgers. You're number 5. He's going to find,
that is your weakness, Ray. You and him are tight. You and Brendan
we are.
Rodgers.
But I mean, you look at this, like who else got drafted late? Like in the middle infield, Marco Luciano, the rookie, Wilmer Flores. I mean, Bryce Terang. Now, Bryce Terang was the guy I almost went with instead of.
Did you wait too long?
Well, yeah. Look at my team. Yes.
I guess what I'd throw out there, Ray, is this is what I'd say. Just a quick look.
Yeah.
drafting a second catcher before my second baseman. I guess that to me, it's like, I'm not going to. Now, you've got 2 decent catchers in a 15-team league, but to me, in a league setup like this, I'd have to get that I'd be looking at that second baseman before that second catcher. I'd be looking at a lot of positions starting wise before a second catcher, I guess.
Yeah. And what I was going to do is I was going to take Brandon Lowe. Is it Lau? Brandon Lau. He's the Lau. Brandon Lau. But he went before I could take him the next round. I was going to take him after Diaz.
Okay.
I just looked at the catcher spot, and it's like the cliff was there. To me, Diaz is the last guy, and then it's like I'm hoping Yan Gomes has another season at 38 years old.
It is a cliff. I give you that. There was a significant cliff after that spot.
I was going to take Langoliers in the 19th round, the round before, and then I was going to take Brandon Lau. That was my plan. Now, those 2 guys might have hit 230, but they could have hit 59 home runs. That was my plan. Both guys got taken right before. So I had to pivot a little bit. I felt really dirty making the Diaz pick. I think I made the Diaz pick with like 2 seconds left on the clock. Like, it was the longest wait because I was like, God, I really don't want to do this, but I eventually did it.
Yeah. Draft is up, Ray. We'll have write-up probably later this afternoon, Ray.
I think it'll be East Coast, probably around 1 o'clock or so, 2 o'clock East Coast.
Okay. And the link is rtsports.com/LABR-mixed-draft. Ray will also have a link in his column for that, so you can take a look at how these 15 experts put their squads together. So a lot more to discuss there, but we'll leave it for now. We got many other things to discuss, including Aaron Judge, Ray. You kind of noted it there in the preview. This toe thing, I remember when it happened on that Saturday night in L.A., and it wasn't seen as like a disaster when Aaron Judge ran into the right field wall and kind of limped around. You thought, maybe a couple of days, and it was with him all season. And the frustrating part, Ray, is it's now with him entering this season, or at least he's very open about the fact that it's probably never going to be 100%. I mean, he said, for my career, we're going to have to manage this thing with my toe. Now, I don't know if it's worthy of saying, I've got to drop him out of the first round, or he's now a second or third rounder. I mean, you're rather negative, but when you're a big dude and it's like, wow, is a big dude going to be knocked out by a little thing like a toe? It sometimes, Ray, is not something that will piss him off in April or May or June, but you get to August and you're like, oh my God, this is becoming such a pain in the rump, or a pain in the toe, as this may be. He will be able to tough it out. They will be able to give him cortisone shots. But I just think, Ray, it eventually leads to something where it's like, you probably want to be a DH. You probably don't want to be in the field as often. And Judge is fine in the field. Judge can play center field. But now I just think defensively, which we don't normally care about, but probably affects him a bit. Probably the biggest thing here, Ray, is stolen bases, maybe. If you're going to stretch things out and try to guess, it's just something you don't want with any first-round pick, is the fact they go into the season and they're telling you this is going to be a bother all year. That's kind of what I can say, Ray, is that's a negative to me when looking at guys, and therefore I do like Ohtani more. I do like Alvarez more, or Bryce Harper more, or probably Austin Riley more. These guys are supposedly coming in healthy, whereas Aaron Judge, not that he's unhealthy, but he's never going to be totally right all year long. Yeah,
and I think there has to be, we don't know quantifiably, but there has to be a difference between being 6'1", 190 and being 6'8", 270. I mean, and I've talked about this before many times, won't reiterate the whole thing. I had a toe issue years ago. It hurts like hell. And it's like, I used to hear it and be like, toe. No, it hurts like hell. And, when I'm weighing 185 pounds and he's weighing 280 pounds, it's a huge difference. And, I think that the positive side of this for Aaron Judge is that Giancarlo Stanton will get hurt at some point. They will probably be able to then use Judge at the DH, use Trent Grisham, who's a very strong defensive player out in center field. So they gave themselves some pivots there. But I noted it earlier. Yeah, he's played 145 games 2 of the last 3 years, Aaron Judge. But those are the only 2 times in 6 years he's played 115 games. So we have a track record here of a guy that struggles to stay in the lineup. We have the admission that the injury last year that wasn't supposed to be a big deal that cost him 55 games is going to be something they have to monitor. That's not good, especially when you've got a guy like Giancarlo Stanton, despite being in better shape this year for baseball. He's a guy that misses games and everything. You can't play him in the field. He's a butcher out there at this point. So they It's tough. I'm not willing to pay the price that others are at this point with Aaron Judge.
Yeah, and it is a hefty price, first round. Again, it's not that Aaron Judge can't be a first rounder. He absolutely can.
For sure.
It's just when you're looking at guys in the first round, even though we can't guarantee anything, we'd like to guarantee as much as we can, which is, and one thing I've always held on to, and it most notably relies with pitching. But I've always said, you're always fearful guys are going to get injured. Why are you drafting guys early who are already injured? People do that all the time. That was the Jake DeGrom thing. Yeah. It's like people just say, oh, you're going to be fine. I mean, I was talking about it with Ray and Corey Seager. Mm-hmm. Hopefully by the time we get to late March and we're in our drafts, our home league drafts, whatever it may be, Seager's on the field. Seager's doing things. But right now you're drafting a guy who's injured, and I realize when you're drafted on February 21st, you play the reports, 6 weeks from now, surely he'll be fine. That's the plan. But I think as we get closer, and we're going to see guys missing time, we're already seeing guys with oblique injuries and things popping up. One way to avoid that excuse, and it's always used, how's your fantasy team going? Well, it would be great except for injuries. Well, who'd you draft? Well, you drafted 4 guys who were injured on April 1st. Yeah. I mean, you made that choice. And I think with Judge Ray, with the first round cost, it's such a significant investment that you just want to be with somebody who doesn't have an issue coming into the year. And that's why, to me, Judge, sure, there's a spot where he falls and I say, what the hell, I got to go for this. But in the first round, that's not the spot anymore for me with Aaron Judge.
Yeah, and he hit 300 a couple years ago, but he's not a 300 hitter. Okay. He stole 16 games 16 bases a couple years ago. He's not a 16 steal guy. He's never had another season with 10. To your point, he only had 3 steals last year. So if we're talking about him hitting 275 with 6 home runs, which I think is fair. 6 steals, excuse me. 275 with 6 steals. He better be hitting 47 home runs.
Yeah.
And he's not going to hit 47 home runs if he's playing 112 games. So again, he could be the league MVP. He hits the ball as hard as anyone who's ever lived. We've seen magical, majestic, out of this world seasons from him. This is all within the realm of absolutely possible. And maybe I'm looking at my own team with rose-colored glasses that we're talking about the LABR team last night. Corey Seager is a health issue. Yes. That's third round. That is different than first. It's still early. And like I said, it's not ideal, but it's much different than in the first round, at least in my opinion. But again, maybe I'm biased.
Well, and is Corey Seager saying this is something I'm going to deal with the rest of my career? No. That's a difference too. I mentioned the steals up front with Judge. I would be shocked if he ever got back to double digits. And he was at 16 2 years ago. And it's not talked about much, but the 3 last year, Ray, I'd love to see the breakdown of, well, I don't need a breakdown. It wasn't good. He didn't run before. He didn't run after the toe injury. That's probably not coming back. The Yankees aren't going to risk that. Not with this guy. There's no reason for him to run. So, none. And we're hearing he could bat third. Mm-hmm. That also takes away the running. So, Judge is one of those guys. It's risky. Just to let you know, it is risky. He is also one of those guys, Ray, who throughout his career has been really good with a batting average on balls in play. For his career, and this kind of speaks to hitting the ball very hard, 340 is Aaron Judge's BABIP. The major league average, like 295, 300, thereabouts, depending on the year. Last year, though, Ray, Aaron Judge was a guy who fell. I mean, he was 332 in 2021, 340 in 2022, and then 300 in 2023. He was league average last season. Let's talk BABIP. This is a column that people can buy in the Fantasy Guru Draft Guide. It's available. People can dig into it. You've spotlighted a few items. A lot on this sheet, Ray. Where would you like to start? Maybe just how you figure it. I mean, for a guy like Judge, we should know, okay, 340 sounds cool. Remember, that does not include all the home runs that he hit in that year where he was hitting with a 340 BABIP.
Yeah, because batting average in balls in play is BABIP. Home runs on a ball in play. It's over the fence. So home runs don't count in this. So you're right. If Aaron Judge can have a 340 number here and hit 40 home runs, well, there you go. That's why he's so successful, right? Now, he's done a much better job of late with the strikeout. When he started his career, he was a 30+% strikeout guy, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there's a couple of things to know with batting average of balls in play, which kind of came in vogue, I don't know, about a decade ago. The league average is right around 295, 300, like Kyle said. Most players end up around that. And when I say around that, they're 280 to 320, right? They're a little 20 up, 20 down. They're around that. Some players, for a variety of reasons, the type of balls they hit, the velocity they put on the baseball, like Aaron Judge, Some players are always at 340. Some players are always at 270. So while 300 is the average, and there tends to be a regression to that point, no matter where you fall, some guys are always above it. Some guys are always below it. So there's reasons for that. So I think that a lot of people will say, well, his batting average of balls in play is 272. So he's going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, yeah. But we have to dig in beyond that. It's almost like batting average of balls in play is a gateway drug, Kyle, because it's the way you notice things seem to be going really well or going really poorly, and let's figure out why that is.
Well, and I think, Ray, you kind of work on the edges of BABIP, especially preseason or in season, when you're judging a hitter and, can they sustain this, or is this just bad luck? I mean, you look at the edges and the extremes, and you see guys with like a 220 BABIP, or you see guys with a 408 BABIP, and that's really where I've used it the most.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if there are guys that, wow, I didn't know Yandy Diaz hit 330 last year, and you start to kind of look into why, and you check the BABIP and you see if there's anything crazy or silly there. Is it way outside of his norms? So you're right. It's kind of that gateway entry point. But I do find in season, Ray, because people love to trade. And I think that's one of the numbers I always look at when a guy maybe is disappointing and you're thinking of buying low or selling high. BABIP is a number to me, Ray, that can kind of indicate some of those targets on the sell high and buy low in season.
I think that, again, to me, it's more of a gateway drug than the answer. And you can see the reason there in point number 3. It takes 750, 800 plate appearances for this number to normalize. So what we'll often see, and this happens every year to your point, Kyle, is we'll see someone with the 395 mark in the first half, and the player's batting 330 and everyone's jazzed, right? It's going to be top 5 in the batting title race this year. Then the number drops to 301 in the second half, and the guy hits 270 in the second half. So, yeah, you want to be careful here because the sample size, again, you need more than a full season if we're being honest about that. So if you're making that move on May 15th, you're taking a chance because it could continue. It could drastically change. It could be the same. But I think it's a good starting point for me because, we know, as an example, you can't post a number of 380 year after year. Mm-hmm. You just can't do it, right? We know that if the guy's got a mark of 420, well, yeah, there's no possible way that that's going to continue for the course of the season. So it's useful in that respect, but I feel like a lot of people use it as a crutch. Yeah. And you can run into rough spots. You can run into danger zones if that's the only thing you're looking at.
Does it really matter to anything else besides? I know it matters because the more hits, the more runs, the ribbies, all that stuff kind of profiles. But is BABIP mainly just used in tandem with average for you? I mean, is that kind of like, okay, a batting average, I'm looking at this number that counts in my league, and really BABIP is just a feeder to that number? It's or does it feed it all into home runs or ribbies, or is that, yeah, it does because they're on base more, but there's really no correlation perhaps?
Well, look at that little graph we got there. If you hit a line drive, your batting average of balls in play is 630. So, yeah, 630, which means your batting average is 630 or better. Right?
Line drive, kids.
yeah, right? And then you see the batting average of balls in play of 95 on fly balls. Why? Because it doesn't count any of the home runs, right? So the number would be way higher, but it doesn't count any of the home runs. So basically, they're hitting that lazy fly ball to center field versus hitting the line drive in between the second and third base hole. So I think that even when you look at batting average of balls in play, you have to understand the type of hitter we're dealing with, because Luis Arias can have a higher mark than Aaron Judge just because of the style of balls that they put in play. Now that's not always the case. Aaron Judge is a bad guy to talk about because he is an outlier because he hits the ball as hard as anyone who's ever lived. So, the edges, I think it has some relation to batting average, but you need to take that second step to understand what type of batted balls are that batter's, purview.
One other bullet point you've got on there. What is it? Number 2. Any change of the BABIP of 30 points up or down deserves a red flag. Further study. As we leave BABIP, that leads us to the Cleveland Guardians. That leads us to our player profile of Stephen Kwan, who you see behind Ray there. And now you see an image of Stephen Kwan. This is a guy, Ray, that magic number of 30 in his rookie season. The BABIP was 323. In his second season, it was 294, 30 points down. And what do you know? The batting average fell 30 points. The on-base percentage fell 30 points, and combined, the OPS fell 60 points. All this thing. So this is kind of a good follow-up to BABIP as we enter with the Cleveland Guardians. And again, we like to start with a player profile. We'll get to some other things with the team. But let's start with Steven Kwan. He's not a unicorn, Ray, but he's a unique player. We don't see a lot of guys like Kwan who mainly his top ability is singles, putting the ball in play, not striking out. There's not a great deal of power here. There aren't any takeoff numbers, and it begs the question, how good is he as a fantasy asset? He may be one of those better real-life players than fantasy players.
Yeah, he's very much, you'll remember this name because I talked about it. Nick Madrigal was supposed to be this guy, and he couldn't stay healthy, and he's still kicking around trying. But Kwan is a fascinating player for two reasons. One, because, again, the batting average of balls in play, if that's the same numbers the year before, his line is almost identical to his rookie season.
Yeah.
Like, everything is, and I love this. His isolated power mark was 101 and 102. Like, it was the same exact guy in the 2 years. There was just a little fortune or lack thereof, with the base hit, little 6 inches this way, 4 inches that way kind of thing. So I think we have a very good handle on who he is. That stability is fantastic. I think he's more of a 285 hitter than a 265 hitter. So if we get 285, we get 20 steals, he plays every day and scores 90 runs. Okay, we can find a spot for that in deeper mixed leagues. In the 10-team league, the lack of power hurts you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's the secondary part that you're talking about, is that what is his real value? He is a better real life player than a fantasy player. If you're in a points league, he's tough because there's no power. If you're in a roto league, there are certainly ways you can use him, but it's kind of like the old Joey Gallo in the other direction. Joey Gallo was all power, and you had to work around the batting average. Kyle Schwarber, right? You got a weakness if you take this guy. It's a different weakness with Kwan because he'll give you some steals and give you the batting average, but the counting category, especially the home runs and RBIs, just aren't going to be there. So it's almost like you have to construct your team understanding that, because if you need to hit 318 home runs and he's only going to hit 6, you got to find it somewhere else.
And the spot he's going, you see the ADP 214. If you look at other outfielders, all of them in that area are a mess. And by a mess, I mean none of them, they all have pock marks, to where surely one of these 10 guys will hit this year. But, Kwan's issue is not the issue that Christopher Morel has. Christopher Morel's issue is, well, it is kind of the issue that Jared Kelenic has. Starling Marte's issue is not Jared Kelenic's issue. Like all of these guys, right? By the time you get to where Kwan's going off, they all have issues. I think my issue with Kwan, Ray, as I see it, the only true upside here is going to be the batting average, and everything else is like, that's it. I guess he could have 30 steals maybe, but I kind of feel like, with Starling Marte, maybe he turns back the clock and has that last 2020 season.
Right.
2020 is never happening with Steven Kwan. And honestly, Ray, when I look at all those other options, it's not that I don't like Kwan or I wouldn't draft him, but if I'm drafting Steven Kwan, it's because at that point in the draft, I'm short on batting average. Because nothing else, Ray, really excites me. You could say the runs, but really I'm making a Steven Kwan play at that point because I want a 295, 300 hitter. And so I think if your team has gotten to that point, you're short at average, he's going to fit better than Christopher Morel. Right. He's going to fit better than Jared Kelenic, Dalton Varsho. That's where Kwan wins out over those other guys at that point.
Yeah, and it's tough. Over the years, we did the whole Billy Hamilton thing. You and I joked he can't hit, but he's stealing 58 bases. So there was always, at the end of the season, you look at the numbers, and it's like, well, he grades out really well in the fantasy space, even though really he's pretty deficient. Kyle Schwarber is the same way. 40, 95, 95 is fantastic. If he's hitting 202, that's not so good. Kwan is the same kind of guy, just a different style of player, right? He just goes about doing it in a certain way. There's a couple things he's really good at. There's a couple things he's not good at. So, he's tough to evaluate. I think you end up at the end of the day, I do, ranking him as like an outfielder 5, which I think is fair. But he might be an outfielder 5 for my team based upon the way it's built. It may not be an outfielder 5 for your team based upon the way your team is built. So that is very important. He is not someone that you just plug in regardless. He is someone that has to fit your roster construction. It's very important with Steven Kwan.
That is a look at Steven Kwan. Let's get to our 4 questions for the Guardians as we continue our team preview. Number one, Ray, does Shane Bieber have anything left? I mean, I kind of worry about this guy, don't you?
I do. And I think that the one thing we all point to is the lack of velocity. The velocity has just been going down the last couple of years. And I think he can still be a very effective pitcher, but if he's trending more toward, Kyle Hendricks than Kevin Gausman, right? And for what it's worth, there are videos out there. He went to Driveline, okay? And there are videos out there. He's got the velocity back. So, throwing in the cage with them is a lot different than on the hill, in August. But I think that Bieber is a solid pitcher, should be drafted to be a solid pitcher. He should not be drafted to be a difference maker at all. I'd be shocked if he got back to his previous levels.
For those who are in the autograph game, you should just hang out at Driveline in the parking lot in the off season. I mean, I feel like, Ray, there's like a line of major leaguers waiting to get into Driveline each and every day. So that's where you go for the ticket, for the autograph search. Number two, and I don't want to say it's the fall of Bieber. Bieber was a Cy Young guy and doesn't appear to be anywhere there now. Jose Ramirez. And Ray, he is still, he went first round of your LABR draft, but the question is, does he stem the decline? And I know these are just one number, but Ray, we've gone on OPS 993, 893, 869, 831. That's 4 years of falling OBPs. OPS plus, which is a little more fair, 167, 142, 148, and then 131. We're now in our 30s. Again, Ray, he's still being drafted like he's a stud. But I just wonder, what's the likelihood of him getting back to, say, an OPS plus of 150 or getting that OPS back to 900? Is that not there for Ramirez, you think?
He's only 31. He's a really interesting guy because he's one of the few power hitters in baseball that has a walk to strikeout ratio that's really good, right? Mm-hmm. He's the anti Kyle Schwarber. His strikeout rate's 12% or whatever it is. I think that the interesting thing with Ramirez, again, is his age. He's very comfortable with where he's at, his spot in the lineup, and the fact he runs. And because even though the league runs more and we had all the steals stuff go through the roof in 2023, we still have a guy who almost went 25-25. I think it's smart to pace your expectation with Ramirez at last year's levels. Okay. Do that. Could he exceed that? He could. I think one of the hard problems with him is that this team is not an explosive offense. If he's got Kwan and Jimenez ahead of him, okay. But, Josh Naylor, Bo Naylor, Ramon Laureano behind him, you start worrying a little bit about the runs and the steals column. The runs and the RBI column going up significantly from last year.
Question 3, you just mentioned them. The Naylor boys. There's a good chance these guys may be batting back-to-back in the lineup. Where do they fit for you, Ray? I think Josh had the surprisingly good year. Bo, we got our first look, and for a catcher, it was fine. But how do you handle these guys? I'm still a little probably out than in on both of the Naylors.
I think both of them are elite second-tier players at their position. By that, I mean just outside the top 12, right? So I think that Josh, has reached his ceiling. He was spectacular with runners on base, and he's not going to ever be a 30 home run guy. I think, he can be who he is right now, this is what I hope Ty France would be. We've talked about him before. I think Naylor, this is him. Okay. Bo, the catcher, I'm very intrigued by because we saw it, he's got a good offensive game, and he started slowly last year, but then he really kicked it into gear down the stretch. I think he should play most days, which is nice for a young player, but there's other youngsters like Gabriel Moreno, Keibert Ruiz. I would prefer these youngsters on the offensive side over Bo Naylor. I think he's a strong catcher too, but not someone that should be drafted as a catcher 1.
And our fourth question on the Cleveland Guardians. Do you remember, or should you remember, Ramon Laureano? He's with Cleveland. Who'd have thunk it? He was traded last season. Very minor deal. Ray, there was a point 2-3 years ago where it's like this guy's gonna take off and be a 5-category dude. Mm-hmm. Home runs, stolen bases. He's gonna drive in 95. He's gonna score he's gonna be the legit. Never has happened. There was PED issues. There were.
Oh, did we lose Kyle? Kyle was saying PED issues. I'm gonna keep talking here. Kyle was saying PED issues for Laureano. It's true. You look back at his 2029 season. He was great. To your point,
I think.
Yeah. But
I was going to say, you nailed it. PED issues and everything going on. Should we remember this guy? Should we care about this guy? Is there any reason to take a flyer on Ramon Laureano anymore?
He's outfielder 101 right now in the rankings at fantasyguru.com.
That would indicate no.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, that might be aggressive. I can't. There's too many injuries and there's too much up and down. He could go 15-15, and I don't think anyone would be shocked by that. So, there's something there, but his batting average isn't going to be strong. There probably will be injuries. There's some concern with the off the field stuff. I just think, 2019 was a long time ago. Let's put it that way.
New arrivals for this team. Again, Laureano came in the trade, but they were very quiet. And that's just Cleveland's MO right now. They're trying to trade guys away more than trade them in. Austin Hedges, Scott Barlow. I mean, that's legitimately like big names, if you will. Prospect wise, and we talked about this guy a couple of weeks ago, Kyle Manzardo at first base, or DH, wherever they want to put him. Probably going to break camp with this team. And Brian Rocchio, the shortstop, who to a lot of people is a top 15 prospect. Ray, the Guardians may have both these guys in their opening day lineup.
They may. And I think in the case of Manzardo, it's really intriguing because dude can hit. He's a legit power hitter. He's a guy that should hit 30 home runs at the big league level when he's developed. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but if he does indeed end up not just making the team, but as their starter at first base, they can put, Josh Naylor at DH. He's going to be someone that could vie for the Rookie of the Year award. So that is definitely a name. I was disappointed last night. I was going to grab him as my last guy last night. I ended up with Nolan Shanuel because Manzardo went right before me. But he was definitely a target of mine at the end of that 15-team labor draft last night.
Last thing on the Guardians, take a chance on who?
I'm going to say take a chance on Kyle Manzardo.
Okay. I'm going to have Andres Jimenez on here, who, kind of did the same exact thing as the year before when he broke out. Wasn't exactly good, but it was all within the realm of possibility. Last year, I feel like everybody was talking about him as a get. This year, I feel like nobody's talking about him as a get. So I'll put Jimenez there. As for my pass on, Emmanuel Clase, Ray. And again,
you beat me
is
to
that
it.
where you go to? It's just where you have to draft. He is a top 20 pitcher. And it's just like, man, I can't go there. And the number, like the save number was impressive as hell. How he got there was not necessarily great, but it was good enough. I feel like last season he had a lot of efforts that guys were on base, or he gave up a run, then he got a win, or, he survived for a save. Like in the end, all you care about is the save numbers. But he's my pass on guy. The price is just too high, Ray.
Yeah, he's my guy too. And the fact is that it's the cost. And we have a series of articles that just came out. Relievers to target, relievers to avoid. He's in the relievers to avoid area. Lost some strikeouts, lost some sexiness, blew a bunch of games. Still the guy, and I still think there's a very real possibility of getting 30 saves, but I'm just not paying the price others are willing to pay.
The thing is, he can struggle, and he's not losing that job.
Yeah.
I mean, Cleveland will keep rolling him out there. He'd have to be hurt and miss time, and like a guy moves in and takes over. So that is our look at the Cleveland Guardians. Tomorrow, everyone's excited for the Colorado Rockies. It'll probably be nothing from Ray but Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers this, Brendan Rodgers that.
I'll have that picture behind me.
Yeah, make sure of that. Let's go to our MLB positional preview this week. It's all things shortstop. Middle of the week, so it's time to talk about the bums. Actually, a lot of names here, Ray. Many names at shortstop. You see a couple of them there, Javi Baez, Jeremy Pena. We'll talk about them in depth, but you could throw Bo Bichette on this list. He was still good, but people thought he was going to be, I thought he was going to be MVP level. Didn't come close to that. Carlos Correa is absolutely on this list. Willie Adames of Milwaukee slid off a cliff. Tim Anderson, he was so bad he doesn't have a team right now. We haven't talked about him at all, Ray, isn't it? Are you surprised he doesn't have a team at this juncture?
Yeah, I think he's guys, speaking of batting average, balls in play, he's someone that we highlighted forever because his batting average, balls in play was always immense. Last year, it fell to 323. It was still like a 5-year low, 323. He's amazing in that category. I am surprised that he doesn't have a team, but to be fair, his offensive game toileted last year. And he's one of these guys that he's kind of on that fine line, right? Kind of like Javi Baez, on that fine line of, well, when it goes, it might just not come back. And when it goes, it's not pretty anymore. And so I'm surprised someone hasn't taken a chance because he's a veteran and, he's an energy guy and all that. but I'm not surprised he's meeting less excitement for his services than he probably anticipated.
Bichette, real quickly, are you still bullish on him?
Mm-hmm.
I am bullish on Bichette, kind of still being a relative fantasy star.
Yeah, Bichette, I think, when you have a down season, and I think it's fair compared to previous levels, you have a down season and you hit 300 with 20 home runs, pretty good. I think the real issue for him is he's going to steal, because after stealing 23 bases a couple years ago, he only has 18 the last two. Mm-hmm. I think he can hit 300. I think he can be a 20 home run guy, scoring 100 runs if everything goes right around him. The value likely comes for whether the steal column says 9 or 19.
Let's hit these two guys that folks who are watching us live can see, or even if you're watching us later. Javi Baez, Jeremy Pena. Ray, Baez is very easy to say no to. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know many people who are excited about Javi Baez. I don't know many people who think, he can rediscover what he may have been. Honestly, what he is now is not all that different from what he's always been. It's just, Ray, now maybe he's gotten to the age where the skill set can't overcome all the swing and miss, and maybe there's an attitude issue. But, this is an easy fade for me. Disappointing last year, and I'm not thinking that we're putting him into the surprise list 12 months from now.
Yeah, you never know, because I'll say this. He's been a very good player, and he's 31. Okay, so in theory, if he's motivated, in good shape and all that, he physically should still be able to get a lot of things done. Hasn't in a couple years. He's overpaid now for the Tigers. They're stuck. He's stuck there. I don't know if attitude's probably an issue, as you pointed out. Could he go 2015? Yeah, he could. And you saw it last night in the 15-team mixed league. He went in the last round. People are just out, and I get being out, because I think if he rebounds to 2022 levels, you're still going to yourself, do I care? So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he came out of nowhere to rekindle it, just because, he does have a lot of talent, but I find it very difficult looking at all the data to feel confident that's going to happen.
The guy below him, Jeremy Pena, obviously much longer. The interesting thing with Pena, Ray, is if you look at last season, it wasn't bad per se. He was about the same guy as the year before, but what happened and what alarmed people, the power evaporated. This guy went from a 426 slug to 381. OPS was a little lower. His batting average was better. His on-base percentage was better. You look at his counting numbers, he was better with steals. He was better with runs, not by a significant margin, but he was better. Batting average, again, 10 points higher. But, Ray, this power, it just left. And I wonder, when you look at year one versus year two, he went from 22 homers to 10, and he had 55 more plate appearances, 55 more at-bats in year two versus year one. Did his batted ball profile just totally flip-flop from year one to year two?
I think the real problem with him is that, yes, it did. He showed up. If you remember, he showed up to camp last year with biceps like Lou Ferrigno. He looked like like the CMC thing a couple years ago, where the picture was at such an angle that looks like his biceps bigger than your leg. And he had that great postseason, and the expectations was too high. And I said it last preseason, your expectations are too high. You look at what happened last year. His fly ball rate went from 46 to 54%. Okay, that's a huge number. That's where Stephen Kwan should be. That's not where you're going to be if you want to hit 25 home runs.
Yeah.
His launch angle went from 9% to 5%. He just didn't get the ball in the air. Worse than that, his barrel rate, which is when everything comes together, you hit a barrel, right? His barrel rate was cut in more than half. He simply didn't hit the ball with anywhere near the oomph he did the year before. And when he hit it on the ground. So there's work to do here. I would not be surprised if he returned to his rookie season levels. I wouldn't. But again, what does that do for us in the fantasy space? 20 home runs, 14 steals, batting 255. Javi Baez used to destroy that in his heyday, right? So It's like Pena is a middle infield option in mixed leagues. And there was some growth despite the lack of power last year, but I think he's really just a filler. He's just a guy. I don't think there's a skill here that's outstanding.
Lastly, Carlos Correa. A lot of money, big name. Ray's kind of had that career where he's always been good, but never really great. Maybe a couple of times he's been great. I hate giving up on a guy that young, but last year was just a disaster. And maybe it had to do with, and I get it, the silliness of the offseason, Ray, where he thought he was with one team, this team. I get it. And maybe he never wanted to be in Minnesota, but they would accept him. I don't know where I land on Correa. Like if I was stacking Baez, Pena, and Correa, I'd probably go Correa over these guys, but I wouldn't feel great about him getting like to a 25-90 season this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. And I think that it's always been hard for me personally because I've loved Correa and his overall game is great. He's a leader. He's strong defensively.
He looks the part. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks the part, smile, the whole thing. Like his actions on the field are fluid and beautiful, but it just bleh. And you basically look at him and you profile him very similarly to Jeremy Pena, but with one steal. It's just like as much as you want to like Correa, he can't be doing anything other than just like your middle round guy if you wait like me to the Brandon Rogers zone. Like because there's not 30 home runs here, there's not 15 steals here, there's not a 290 batting. Like it's just not here. If it all came together, could he have a monster season? I legitimately think he could. I don't think Javier Baez would. I don't think Jeremy Pena would. I do think Carlos Correa could, but I'm not going to pay a price to figure out because I'm likely to be disappointed.
That is our looks at the bums of last year and kind of an outlook for this season. Much more on Shortstops coming up tomorrow. Before we get out of here on Fantasy Sports Daily, a couple of news and notes. Matt McClain of the Reds. We talked about the Reds yesterday. McClain, we kind of spotlighted him as, hey, don't forget about Matt McClain. He is dealing with an oblique issue. He tweaked it early on, says he's going to miss about a week. So something to maybe keep in your back pocket. Boston has added Liam Hendricks. Now, remember, Hendricks underwent Tommy John surgery. It's a 2-year deal. Very doubtful. I mean, we may see him September. I guess you could see him. But more than likely, this is a signing for 2025. Amed Rosario to Tampa, Ray. That's a good Tampa move, I think. Rosario's not an all-star by any stretch, but I wouldn't be stunned if Tampa Bay found a way to turn him into a surprise contributor.
Yeah, and I kind of surprised that he didn't get like a starting gig. Like with the Rays, it's like it'll be a little bit here, a little bit there. We'll try, and I think I wrote on the free agent piece over at fantasyguru.com something like it could be 350 plate appearances to 500. Like it's weird that he's not, because there are teams that obviously could have used him as a full-time starter, but he'll probably have positional flexibility. And you're right, the Rays have a tendency to kind of make things work out even when you're a little skeptical.
Cubs made a couple of veteran additions. Dominic Smith and David Peralta on the minor league roster. Not bad moves, really, for a team like the Cubs. Hyun-Jin Ryu is done in the majors. If he missed it over the weekend, back to the KBO. Let's see. Oh, the other one, Ray, I wanted to touch on. Tarek Skubal. There was a report he hit 100. Yes. I don't want my guy throwing 100 when he never really has. I don't like that in the third week of February.
Steve Phillips said the exact same thing yesterday on Sirius XM. He's like, save the bullets, kid. Like, what are you doing? I mean, the hype in his ADP is just outside the top 50 overall. If people haven't looked, the hype is out of control already, and it's going to inch upward. Yeah. He was great in the second half, and he's always been someone that everyone thought could be great. You love seeing that, but it's not even just he hit 100 in camp. It's mid-February. Like, it's early in camp. Like, it's a little concerning. I agree with you.
More on Skubal in Detroit coming up, I think, later in the week. Maybe we'll get to them on Friday. Ray, that will do it for us today on FSD. Fun talk. A lot of things. Good draft. We'll be doing more of that as we go through the upcoming weeks and, I guess, months. But that will do it for us today. Thanks to everybody on YouTube and X and certainly Facebook. Everybody who downloads, we appreciate it. Ray, we'll get back together on Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
All right. Have a good day, Kyle. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, more on shortstops, more on Colorado or something on Colorado. Who else is giving you the Rockies? If that's not enough to show up tomorrow, I don't know what is. We will see it. Kyle Elfrink here, Ray Flowers there. Have a good one. It's Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com.